Sophia, where have you been hiding? Off with that mystery godson of yours again, huh? The head nurse teased with a smirk, eyeing the young orderly who seemed to vanish whenever there was a lull in the ward. Well, I don't think anyone needs me right this second, the girl replied hesitantly, her voice barely above a whisper. I just pop in to see him when I've got a spare moment. Where do you even find the time? What's with all the fuss over him? Don't tell me you've gone and fallen for the guy, chuckled a passing doctor, tossing the jab over his shoulder with a grin. Mr. James, who'd been around long enough to notice, had been quietly amused by the girl's dedication to this unknown patient for quite some time now. No, it's not like that at all. But someone's got to talk to him, right? How else will he ever remember anything? I've been trying, reading him poetry, throwing out random names to see if anything clicks. I started calling him Daniel, and he said it felt kind of familiar. Sophia defended herself, her tone earnest as she tried to explain. Oh, call him King Henry VIII for all I care, but don't forget about the other patients. You're not his personal caregiver, you know. The head nurse scolded, her voice firm and no nonsense. With a quiet sigh, Sophia trudged off to tend to her duties. The root of her workplace woes was a patient who'd been brought in a couple of months back, found on the street in critical condition. He'd suffered a severe head injury, and at first, the doctors weren't even sure he'd pull through. Miraculously, his physical health had slowly improved, but his memory? That was another story. They'd found him with no ID, no clue who he was. He couldn't recall his own name, let alone an address. The police, naturally, had been notified by the hospital staff, but no one had come looking for him. So there he lay, a John Doe in every sense, nameless and unnoticed, in a ward already overflowing with patients. Most of the staff treated him as just another case, providing the bare minimum care under the state-funded quota for unidentified individuals, using whatever basic meds were allocated for such situations. But Sophia, on her own accord, had taken him under her wing. In the beginning, she'd cared for him when he was bedridden, unable to move. Later, when he could finally sit up and manage some basic tasks on his own, she'd still drop by, trying to jog his dormant memory with conversation and little prompts. It wasn't love, as some of her colleagues liked to tease, though she couldn't deny she felt a pang of something for him. After all, she'd been on her own for a while now. Her early marriage had been a brief and bitter disaster, ending in a messy divorce. She tried not to dwell on it, especially at work, where she could at least distract herself from personal heartache. Romance was the last thing on her mind. Sure, this Daniel was young, maybe even handsome in a rugged sort of way before life dealt him this cruel hand. But in his current state, he stirred only pity and compassion in her. Sophia's heart ached when she thought of him lying alone in his sterile room, staring blankly at the ceiling, his mind just as empty. It must be terrifying, she often mused, to lose everything, your entire past, wiped clean. He must have had a family once, parents, friends, maybe even a spouse or kids of his own. So why wasn't anyone searching for him? How could a person be so utterly forgotten? The thought gnawed at her, perhaps because she, too, had felt the sting of loneliness lately. Her own parents had perished in a tragic plane crash years ago, leaving her with no other family to lean on. That void, she suspected, was what had pushed her into a hasty marriage with the first man who'd shown interest. At first, Walter had seemed decent enough, and for his sake, she'd even dropped out of school, taking up this orderly job at the hospital to support their life together. Walter had wanted a traditional setup, kids, a quiet wife to keep the home fires burning. Sophia had believed they could build a happy life, maybe share Sunday mornings over pancakes and coffee, laughing about little things. But it hadn't worked out. Turns out, Walter had a gambling problem. and their dreams crumbled faster than a house of cards. The very first year of their marriage revealed a harsh truth. Living with a man like him was nearly unbearable, and changing him seemed like a lost cause. She even sought advice from a colleague at their hospital department, hoping for some insight, but the response was far from encouraging. "Well, Sophia, there's no easy fix for this." The doctor sighed, shaking his head. "You can try, sure, but it'll cost you a fortune, and even then, there's no guarantee. He could snap at any moment. If I were you, I'd cut your losses and get out while you still can. If you can manage it, that is." Making the decision to file for divorce was agonizing, but in the end, she knew it was inevitable. The final straw came when her husband started dropping not-so-subtle hints about selling her apartment and moving into a cramped dorm. It dawned on her that his real plan was to leave her with nothing, homeless and dependent. Despite his fierce objections, she pushed through with the divorce. Yet, even after the papers were signed, she couldn't fully break free. Knowing full well how little she earned, her ex still had the audacity to show up at her door, begging for money with no intention of ever paying it back. Work, ironically, became her refuge, a temporary escape from the chaos of her personal life. One day, as she clocked in for another grueling shift, she received news that could have been cause for celebration under different circumstances. The wife of one of her patients had finally been located. "Yes, this is Victor Froloff, my husband," a young, strikingly beautiful woman declared with unwavering certainty. "What do you mean he's lost his memory? Take me to him right now. I'll jog his memory in no time. What, did he think he could just abandon me and leave me to raise our child alone? Not on my watch." Stepping into the hospital room, she wasted no time with pleasantries and launched straight into a tirade. "All right, enough of this act. Get up already. Your son misses you, you know." Her behavior was anything but what Sophia expected from a wife reuniting with a loved one after months of separation. Sophia couldn't help but wonder if the woman had lost her grip on reality, driven to the edge by stress, completely unaware of the patient's fragile condition. The man himself showed no signs of recognition or relief. If anything, he seemed overwhelmed and frightened by her intensity. Mr. Edward, the doctor in charge of the case, stepped in to calm her down, explaining that the patient's condition was still a serious concern. But his words fell on deaf ears. Oh, how convenient for him to just lie around in a hospital bed, she snapped, her voice dripping with bitterness. He vanished months ago, and not without reason. He took everything with him, every last penny, and not even my money, mind you, but my father's. My dad, by the way, is a well-known businessman, Mr. Nicholas. Maybe you've heard of him? And now what? He's suddenly lost his memory? Poor thing, robbed his own father-in-law. Left me and our son with nothing to our names. She ranted, her anger palpable. Sophia listened to the outburst in stunned silence. She could hardly fathom that the man she'd cared for so diligently might have been faking it all along. "No, you've got it wrong," she interjected, trying to defend her patient. "Maybe someone robbed him. He came in with a severe injury after all." But before she could say more, the attending physician stepped in and gently pulled her aside. "This isn't our fight, Sophia," he said firmly. "Let the police sort it out. When he was brought in, he had no ID, no money, nothing. We're here to heal, not to play detective and chase down crooks." "What a brilliant excuse!" the woman shot back, her tone sharp as a knife. "So, my father gets bled dry, I'm left struggling with a young child, and now you expect me to take on a sick husband as well?" The patient listened to the heated exchange with tears welling in his eyes. If he'd held any hope of reuniting with family, this surely wasn't the reunion he'd imagined. The tense scene finally came to a close when Mr. Edward intervened once more. "Let's not argue here. Please, come back with proper documentation. His passport, photographs, anything that can verify your claims. We need to handle this by the book. As you can see, he doesn't even recognize you himself, and we can't possibly let him go with you under these circumstances. Well, are you saying I'm making this up? If I were lying, don't you think I'd have picked a better man to call my husband? I'll be back tomorrow, so don't worry about it. The woman snapped with a huff before storming off. Curious, isn't it? She didn't even give him a hug or try to talk to him. Sophia mused to herself, her brow furrowed in disbelief. Could she really be some kind of con artist pulling a fast one? Meanwhile, Daniel, or was it Victor, looked far from happy. His eyes kept darting nervously toward the door, and after the woman's visit, he refused to speak with Sophia at all, shutting her out completely. I don't know anything. Maybe time will jog my memory, and something will come back to me. For now, it's just a blank slate, he muttered, turning away to stare at the wall, his voice heavy with frustration. Sophia figured it might be best to give him some space. Perhaps a quiet moment alone would stir something in his mind. Her shift had just ended anyway, so she headed home. But the moment she stepped into her apartment, she realized her ex-husband had once again decided to drop by uninvited. Hey there, Soph. Good to see ya, he chirped cheerfully, strolling out of the kitchen with a grin. Sorry about this. I got a bit peckish and helped myself to a few things. Hope you don't mind. Sophia walked into the kitchen and took a quick glance around. Helped himself? That was an understatement. He'd practically raided her fridge, leaving behind a mountain of dirty dishes and empty wrappers strewn across the counter. All right, there's nothing left to eat now, so you can hit the road, she said, exhaustion lacing her tone. Come on, babe, don't be like that. You've got a heart of gold. Surely you can spare a bowl of soup for a poor guy you left high and dry, right? Walter wheedled, putting on his best puppy dog eyes. And groceries? Hey, I'll run to the store for you. Pick up whatever you need. Just give me a list and a little cash. I'm flat broke again, but it's not my fault. Luck's just not on my side right now. Once I get back on my feet, I'll pay you back, I swear. I'll even buy everything myself next time. Yeah, right, you'll buy stuff. What exactly are you gonna buy? You'll just show up here again with an empty stomach? Sophia shot back, her irritation bubbling to the surface. Now, hold on, no need to talk like that, Walter said, feigning hurt. You make it sound like I only come around for a free meal. Truth is, I can't get over you. I still love you, Soph. You're the only one for me. Look, let me be straight with you. How about you finally hand over the keys to my place? I'm tired of these little surprise visits of yours. Oh, here we go again. Money, keys, food. Can't a young woman focus on something other than material stuff for once? Speaking of money, though, could you spot me a little cash? Just for a short while. I promise I'll pay you back, he said, his tone dripping with mock sincerity as he put on a dramatic pout. You know exactly how much I make and when I get paid. I've got nothing for you today. Just go, all right? She replied, her patience wearing thin. What, you gonna call the cops on me now? Oh, look at you, playing the tough guy. Straight to threats of the police, huh? Realizing he wasn't going to get anything more out of her, Walter switched tactics and started hurling insults. Hand over the keys, she says. Do you even get it, you clueless woman? I kept them for your own good, you lonely old hag. Who else is gonna want you barren as you are? What if something happens? You'll be lying there in your sad little apartment, helpless as a log, with no one to even bring you a glass of water. That's why I've got the keys. You should be clinging to me, not pushing me away. I'm a good guy. I don't hold grudges. Having spat out every vile thing he could think of, Walter finally left, leaving her alone at last. Sophia collapsed onto the couch, burying her face in a pillow. She tried to hold back the tears that welled up unbidden, but deep down, she couldn't shake the sting of his words. Lonely, unwanted, that's what she was. Sure, her patients at the hospital needed her, but for what? To fetch this, carry that, clean up after them. Once they were discharged, they'd forget her in a heartbeat. Even this Daniel, or Victor, or whoever he was, once he's released to his wife and son, he'll remember his home and his life in no time. And her? She'll be nothing more than a fleeting memory, if that. The tears didn't bring any relief, but they kept coming, and her heart still ached with a quiet, gnawing sadness. The next day, Sophia trudged into work with a heavy heart, bracing herself for the inevitable storm. More often than not, her troubles stemmed from none other than Mr. James, the hospital's seasoned doctor with a notorious reputation as a charmer. Though well past his prime, he had a way of turning heads, and Sophia had caught his eye from the very start. She'd done her best to brush off his suggestive remarks, letting them roll off her back like water off a duck. But her indifference only seemed to stoke his ego further, transforming his flirtations into something more brazen, fueled not by desire, but by sheer indignation. How could a mere orderly dare to spurn him, a man who prided himself on being irresistible to any woman? One afternoon, as Sophia was tending to the potted plants in the lobby, watering the geraniums with a quiet focus, he sauntered over once again, his presence as unwelcome as a sudden downpour on a picnic. "Sophia, darling, must you be so cold-hearted?" he drawled in that sleazy tone of his, dripping with false charm. "Can't you see I'm burning up over here, consumed by passion?" She'd had enough. With a flash of defiance, she shot back. "Well, maybe this will cool you down a bit." Before he could react, she tipped the watering can and splashed the contents right into his smug face, the water dripping down his chin as he stood there, stunned. With that single act, Sophia had doused his so-called ardor, but in doing so, she'd also made a bitter enemy. Mr. James wasn't the type to let such a public humiliation slide. From then on, he seized every chance to make her life miserable, scheming to get under her skin. The arrival of a mysterious patient, dubbed the imposter Daniel, handed him the perfect opportunity to stir up trouble. At first, he egged on the staff, encouraging snide remarks about the undue attention lavished on this unknown man. Soon, though, he ramped up his efforts, pushing hard for the patient's discharge with an almost vindictive zeal. "I don't get why we're still keeping him here," he grumbled during a staff meeting, his tone sharp as a knife. His condition's stable enough, and now, conveniently, a so-called wife shows up out of nowhere. Let her take him home and play nurse. It's obvious he's faking it to dodge whoever he's swindled. Mr. Edward, ever the voice of reason, countered cautiously. "You might have a point to some extent, but we still don't know for sure if she's really his wife." "What's it to us?" Mr. James snapped, waving a dismissive hand. "We're not the cops. Let her cart him off and free up a bed for someone who actually needs it." Mr. Edward wasn't convinced, and rightfully so. The patient's memory might not return for months, if ever, so keeping him in the hospital indefinitely made little sense. The very next day, a woman claiming to be his wife arrived, a young boy in tow, armed with a passport and a handful of photographs as proof. The passport checked out. There was a marriage stamp linking her to the patient, listed as Ms. Elizabeth Frolova. But the photos raised eyebrows. "How come he's always alone in these pictures?" Sophia asked, her curiosity piqued as she flipped through them. "Not a single one with you or the boy?" "Oh, he hated having his picture taken," the woman replied with a haughty sniff, her tone dripping with disdain. "Only did it for official stuff like IDs. And frankly, why's it any of your business? Just let us see him already. My son's been dying to see his dad." "Michael, go on, run to your father," she urged, nudging the boy forward. The child entered the ward hesitantly, approaching the patient with an awkward embrace that felt more rehearsed than heartfelt. "Hey, Dad," he mumbled, his voice small and uncertain. The man, known as Daniel, or perhaps Victor, patted the boy's head with a faint smile, but his eyes betrayed a complete lack of recognition, clouded with confusion. "You can't imagine how ashamed I feel, Sophia," he confided later, after the visitors had left, his voice thick with despair. "I don't remember a thing. I'm sitting here, running my fingers through this kid's hair, feeling how small and innocent he is. I could almost love him, you know? But there's nothing there. No memories, no connection. It's like I'm a stranger to my own life." "Hey, if you felt even a flicker of something, that's a start," Sophia reassured him, her tone gentle as she adjusted the blanket over his legs. "Maybe your memory will come creeping back bit by bit." But deep down, she couldn't shake the nagging suspicion that something was off with this supposed family. Sure, Daniel, or Victor, had no recollection, which was tragic enough. Yet the boy's behavior felt oddly detached, as if he were hugging a distant uncle rather than his own father. And as for Ms. Elizabeth, she showed no warmth, no trace of emotion toward either her husband or her son, her demeanor as cold as a winter morning. "Ugh, who's going to get to the bottom of this mess?" Sophia muttered to herself, wiping down a bedside table with a sigh. "Looks like it's just going to be me, as usual." Sophia wasted no time in digging into the background of the man everyone assumed was the father-in-law of the enigmatic patient, Mr. Nicholas. Word had it that his company had recently gone up in flames, quite literally, due to a devastating fire. Yet, thanks to a hefty insurance payout, he hadn't lost a dime. In fact, he'd come out ahead, considering his business was already on its last legs. The cause of the blaze remained a mystery, and whispers of foul play hung in the air. Even more peculiar was the complete lack of information about the businessman's family or his supposed daughter. Determined to get to the bottom of it, Sophia headed to the hospital to consult with Mr. Edward, the only person who seemed to have her back in this tangled mess. "Well, Sophia, this whole thing stinks to high heaven," the doctor remarked with a furrowed brow. "And to top it off, that so-called wife of his is supposed to show up today to take him home." "I don't think we should let him go just yet," Sophia replied, her voice laced with concern. "Can't we come up with some excuse to keep him here a bit longer?" Before they could hatch a plan, Miss Elizabeth was already in the ward, accompanied by a young boy, bustling about to get her husband ready for discharge. "No, wait, you can't take him yet." Sophia rushed over, her tone urgent. "He still needs one final round of tests before he's cleared to leave." "What on earth is this nonsense?" Ms. Elizabeth snapped, her voice rising with irritation. "Why can't I take my own husband, the father of my child, out of this hospital just because some orderly says so?" "She's absolutely right to be cautious," Mr. Edward interjected, stepping in with a calm but firm demeanor. "Your husband needs to stay just one more day for observation. After that, you can take him home without any hassle." "Fine, but this is the last time. Tomorrow, no more delays, you hear me?" the woman barked, yanking the boy's arm with a roughness that made Sophia wince. As they turned to leave, the boy managed to slip a crumpled piece of paper into Sophia's hand. Once they were out of sight, she unfolded it and read the scrawled, childish handwriting. "These aren't my real mom and dad. I'm from an orphanage. They took me to trick everyone." Shocked by the revelation, Sophia didn't have a chance to share it with Mr. Edward right away. Mr. James, who still harbored a grudge against both her and her ally, had already stirred up trouble by planting a controlled medication in Mr. Edward's belongings. Despite his protests, Mr. Edward couldn't clear his name. The head of the department, uninterested in a proper investigation, simply fired the skilled doctor on the spot. Yet, even after being ousted, Mr. Edward refused to let the strange case drop. Staying in touch with Sophia, he learned about the boy's note during a late-night phone call. Realizing the situation was not just suspicious, but potentially dangerous, he took matters into his own hands and launched a private investigation. What he uncovered only deepened their suspicions. The fire at Mr. Nicholas's firm was no accident. It had been deliberately set. The current patient, Victor, was likely an inconvenient witness to something sinister. Someone had tried to silence him for good, but the attempt failed, leaving him gravely injured and with a shattered memory, which conveniently played into the hands of those behind the scheme. Even more astonishing was the discovery that Victor wasn't Mr. Nicholas's son-in-law as everyone had assumed. He was, in fact, his adopted son. He wasn't married, nor did he have any children. The passport he carried turned out to be a forgery, and Victor wasn't even his real surname. So, where did Ms. Elizabeth fit into this puzzle? As it turned out, she was Mr. Nicholas's mistress, which explained her vested interest in the whole affair. Mr. Edward laid out all these shocking details to Sophia, who, in turn, felt compelled to share the truth with Victor himself. As she recounted the twisted tale, memories began to flood back to him, and he finally understood why his adoptive father had wanted him out of the picture. "There was never any real bond between us," Victor said quietly, his voice heavy with resignation. "He took me in when I was already 12. I reckon he thought he could mold me into some kind of accomplice for his shady dealings. But when he realized I wouldn't play along, he decided I was better off gone for good. I've never been able to stand that Elizabeth, not for a single day. The only thing that tugs at my heartstrings is the kid. Who even is he?" "She doesn't have any children of her own, you know. That boy's from the orphanage, sharp as a tack and brave beyond his years," she explained, passing along a little note with the details. Before long, all the culprits were rounded up and put behind bars. Meanwhile, Sophia kept seeing Victor, a man who still had a laundry list of troubles, not least of which were tied to the messy antics of his ex-family. His health wasn't in great shape either. The hospital had discharged him to recover at home, but the problem was, he didn't have one to go back to. The place he used to live, with his foster father, had been sealed off by the authorities. So, Sophia, being the kind soul she is, offered him a place to crash at hers, just as friends, nothing more. Things were going as well as could be expected, until Walter showed up out of the blue. It wasn't that he couldn't get over his ex-wife or anything sentimental like that. No, he was just scheming to keep using her apartment as his personal crash pad, and while he was at it, mooch off her for some extra cash. But Sophia wasn't having any of it this time. She confronted him with fire in her eyes, demanding he hand over the keys right then and there. "What, you're pulling this nonsense again? I'm telling you, I can still be useful to you." He started to argue, trying to worm his way back in. But Sophia stood her ground, her voice steady as a rock. "Useful? Not a chance. I'm not on my own anymore. I've tied the knot. Speaking of which, where are you at? Come meet my ex." Victor, already well aware of the mess Sophia had been dealing with, stepped forward with a glare that could freeze blood. "Hand over the key to this apartment right now, and don't you ever think about showing your face here again." Realizing he'd hit a dead end, that this door was slammed shut for good, Walter reluctantly surrendered the keys and slunk away with his tail between his legs. "Thanks for that," Sophia said, her voice softening. "Sorry I had to put it like that. I just can't seem to shake him off for good. I needed him to see I'm not alone anymore." Her words trailed off as tears unexpectedly welled up in her eyes. "Why the waterworks?" Victor asked, genuinely taken aback. "It's just, I feel so sorry for myself, for being so alone all this time," she admitted, her voice breaking. Well, I've been meaning to ask you something, Victor said, his tone shifting to something warmer, more earnest. I want to marry you, for real. Seriously? Sophia managed a smile through her tears, her heart fluttering. I'd say yes in a heartbeat. Oh, by the way, Michael's waiting for us. I've been visiting him at the orphanage, you know. I've even looked into adoption, but the sticking point is that I've been on my own. Well, that's perfect then, Victor replied with a grin, pulling her into a comforting embrace. No more obstacles in our way now, right? Just a month later, they had a small, heartfelt wedding, nothing fancy but beautiful in its simplicity. 6 months after that, they officially became Michael's parents, giving him the loving home he'd always deserved. And within another year, their family grew even more with the arrival of a little girl. I hope you've enjoyed this little slice of their story. If it resonated with you, I'd appreciate a thumbs up to show your support. And if you don't want to miss out on more tales like this, hit that subscribe button and tap the notification bell. Wishing you all good health and the very best in life.